Hi.
Hi. My name is Ellie. I'm here with Brooke Shaden, fine art photographer. We're going to be doing a lot of talking today about career building and the business side of photography and fine art photography, which is really exciting. We would love to hear where you guys are watching from. Hi, Sam. Let us know where you are. It's so cool to see people from all over the world. And so yeah, feel free to say hi. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any thing you want to know from a business standpoint from Brooke. She's going to be able to share so much valuable knowledge with you. So it'll be great.
Yay.
I wanted to remind you guys that in about 30 minutes we're going to have Chat and Win. So you will have a chance to win stickers from Sticker Mule if you are active in the chat. So get ready for that. And then we also have the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. You can watch the replay for the one that was today. It should be up on the page for you guys to watch. Today we're making botanical designs with plant elements, so you guys can review that and submit those. We're going to be reviewing those at about an hour and a half, so if you want some feedback from Brooke, make sure to submit those, and you can submit those in the challenge tab, which is right above the chat. So yeah, I think that's all I have. We also, we can look at the schedule for the rest of the week. We had the Daily Creative Challenge earlier this morning with Kathleen. I will be here with Brooke until about 11:30, and then at 11:30 will be the XD Daily Creative Challenge, and then at noon Pacific time we will have Design for Any Screen with Noelle. So you want to make sure you stay tuned for that. And yeah, it'll be great. Lots of learning going on today. So, we have someone from Tallahassee, New York. Cool. Thank you guys for joining, and thanks for participating. We are really excited to be here with you. So do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and your work and what you do? I'm going to pull up
love to.
your beautiful Instagram right here so people can see.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, here we go.
Well, my name is Brooke Shaden. I'm a fine art photographer, so I create mostly for myself and then for other people later. So I come at photography from kind of a maybe slightly different standpoint from a lot of people, where I'm making sort of weird, offbeat art totally alone. I'm also a self-portrait artist, and so a lot of my work is very much oriented on the self, on doing everything myself, on exploring really deeply whatever is inside of me, so that hopefully I can connect that to other people. So a lot of my work is self-portraiture. A lot of it is based around concept and theme and symbolism. And so what I do from my day-to-day life is a lot of strange photo shoots in nature. Lots of going outside to shoot. I don't have a studio space. I don't have a lot of the traditional things that a photographer would have, like lights or a lot of equipment or anything like that. So I use myself, a camera, a tripod, and I make things with it. So my business is largely made up of selling through galleries, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. Book covers, which we're going to talk about today, licensing my work for different things, not only books, but album art, website design, things like that. And then I guess outside of that, I also do a lot of educating and motivational speaking and some charity work too. So that's kind of the gamut of what I do in my business thus far for the last 10 years.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited to learn more about your process. And I think that's so cool, like, that you just use a camera and yourself, and you can create such beautiful work with such simple tools.
You know, it can be simple. That's the great thing, is like it can be as simple as you want it to be, and you can still make something beautiful out of that. And I think, like, for me, the most wonderful thing that's come out of photography has been this knowledge that you can start with nothing almost and then still make something, still bring something into the world that's useful and valuable to people.
Cool.
Love that.
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, cool. Oh, Jan says, I remember her from Creative Live. You were on Creative Live, right? And
Absolutely.
looks like we have people from India, someone from Chicago. Sam says you have a great and consistent aesthetic.
Oh, thank you.
Your work is so good.
That's so sweet.
Cool. Well, yeah, feel free to ask questions, and we'll just jump on in.
And I'm totally an open book.
Yes.
So whatever we want to talk about today, we're going to talk about it. Because I love that we can see the comments and whatever you're thinking. If you have a random question or a seemingly random question, please ask it, because I know that a lot of other people will have the same question.
Yes.
And so my hope is that for the next 2 hours, I just get to share as much as possible with as many people, and everyone's questions get answered.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Cool. So what do you want to start with?
First, let me just open up a few images that are pretty indicative of my body of work. And I just want to walk through a couple images to set the groundwork for what we're going to do, because it's a little bit offbeat sometimes. So this is a really typical picture for me of what I would create. This is going out into the world, finding a space that I'm connected to, and creating in that space. So this is just a forest near my house. I love coming here and creating, but the special thing to me is really being there by yourself and doing the work alone. That's what I really thrive in. So I went out to this space, I created a self-portrait with a tree in front of me, and then from there, from that very sort of normal looking image of myself sitting with a tree, I went and found stock images that I had shot from other places. These doors in particular are from Australia and New Zealand, and I composited them into the trees, added fog, added atmosphere. But for me, my favorite part of editing isn't so much the compositing, it's when you get to the color and the light and you can really manipulate that to look like, I don't know, just like your own little world in your head.
Yeah, the environment.
So these are some more images. I'll kind of go through these a little bit faster. But I love sharing this picture because it's so just like the epitome of weirdness, which I love to embody.
Really cool.
And so what I did is I actually pulled off the side of a road here and just doused myself in paint, and I had to keep a straw in my mouth to be able to breathe. And it was hilarious, and so many people pulled off the side of the road with me to watch and ask questions. And because I guess it's weird to wear all white and wear a bald cap and have paint. And it's so much fun though. So these are the types of images that I love, that I feel really connected to. And this is a great image to talk about theme, because I always start with theme. I pretty much won't create an image unless it's been thoroughly thought through ahead of time. So I'm not one to take my camera and just go shooting. Not at all. I'm not a spontaneous person. I would love to be, but I'm not. And so I work with theme. And so for, an image like this, the theme would be finding light in the darkness, or being able to carry your own light with you. And that's how a lot of my images are. So very much working with natural elements, working with myself, working from a place of concept, and then bringing that into the world of symbolism, so that other people can understand it. And today we're talking specifically about licensing images, creating commissioned images. And it's so important when we talk about that to understand that when you're making an image for someone's book cover or album art or website or just a human being who wants it for themselves, the art has to connect on a wider level than just to yourself. And an image like this is a great example of how I wanted to create an image about sort of pulling your own blue sky over, a dark situation. So how do you do that? Symbolically, so that those symbols connect to lots of people. And that's going to be part of what we talk about today, is just this idea that we have that sort of control.
And things that connect your work with other people. Other people are going to resonate with it because there's something about it that they feel a connection to.
And the way that I do that is in part to talk about let's say, themes that widely resonate with people, really general themes, instead of saying, well, this image is about my pain from when I was 6 years old and this thing happened.
Specific,
and I'll be more general with it. So even though it comes from a personal place, it has...
It's more general.
Yeah, it's more general.
Sarah was asking, I love the storybook look and feel. I'd love to hear how you get so much texture in your work.
I shoot textures all the time.
Okay.
And I'm always looking for texture too.
Yes.
So like this image is a good example of that, where I went into a field that already has texture.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's filled with the wheat and the grass and all of that.
Yeah.
And then I got a skirt that has some tea dye on it, so it had already some texture in it. And I used an ace bandage to wrap around my top because that has great texture as well. And then the twine, which gives it another sort of element, which is wrapped around my head.
Okay.
So I always pay attention to as many natural textures as I can get.
Yes.
As you can see, my work is not modern, it's not clean or minimalist or anything like that. It's super textured. So I also shoot my textures everywhere I go. I'm staying in a hotel. We're in San Francisco right now, and the elevators are like so perfectly textured. So I'm gonna get in there and shoot some textures. Yeah.
And then would you use that as like an overlay?
Exactly, just as a simple overlay.
Okay.
And I guess nothing is that simple.
Well,
but,
sure, yeah.
but pretty simple as an overlay, just making sure it's not touching the skin as much as it is the background and working with it like that. But yeah, I absolutely love texture. So that's what I wanted to show you of my portfolio.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have some questions about your you're using the Microsoft Surface
I am.
Book, right?
This is a Microsoft Surface Pro.
Surface Pro. Okay. Do you want to share a little bit about why you use that?
Yeah, I travel a lot, so I needed a super lightweight computer. I also wanted a touchscreen computer. Okay. And I don't want to alienate anyone, but I'm just not a Mac girl.
Yeah.
And that's
everyone
okay.
has their preference.
Yeah. So, so I went with Microsoft. The Surface Pro works really well. It has the pen, so I can use it with touch, and it has really good pressure sensitivity. Yeah. So it's great for that as well. Yeah. So
cool. Yeah. And then we also had a question. Kita was asking, how do you find people to commission you for composites?
Great question.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let me go through a couple of different ways that this happens for me. And while I do that, let me just pop open this little folder of some book covers that I've done. Covers? So these are just a couple. Oh. I pulled them from the internet, so I'm sorry they're so tiny, but
I love
we have some here. And the way that I'm working with book covers, album art, whatever it may be for licensing, I'm typically like on the ground floor sending emails to random people trying to get in the door. And I think that a lot of people will have the misconception that it's just like super easy and people just like will come. And that's not the case for me and probably for most people. There are amazing licensing sites out there that specialize in this. A couple of them, like one would be Archangel, one would be Trevillian. Like there are a couple of them that really specialize in book covers or high-end book covers and things like that. So it's great to try to get in with one of those companies. And I do have my work with one of those companies, but I don't actually sell that much through them at all. I mostly do it personally. And a lot of people think like, do you have to have a big social media following to get, these book covers? No, genuinely no. Like I started with just my laptop and an email, and I would just search for the small little publishing companies all around. Like one of my very first covers that I sold was to a tiny, tiny company in Illinois. Oh, wow. Just like not connected to anyone, just tiny. And I sold it for like $50 or $100 just like to this little company. And I worked with them a few times. And then at one point they said, would you be willing to work with another company that we sometimes partner with? And I was like, oh yeah, definitely. Sure, yeah. And then that ended up being one of the major publishing companies. And so I started to get in with bigger ones like Penguin or HarperCollins and stuff like that. So really it was just a matter of starting small with little publishing companies and just growing that. But it really does start on the ground. Like you have to send those emails, do the research, see where you fit in. Like I work really well with young adult fantasy books. That's like my genre.
I can totally see that. It fits so well.
Exactly. And so know that. You know what I mean? Like know where your work fits and then target those companies. And that's the best advice that I can give is don't just wait for people. Don't think like, oh, I have to build my social media following first. If you have the skill to create book covers, do it.
Would you start by sending an email? Is that how you first?
Yeah, I would totally send an email.
Okay.
Like I started out, I would write an email. Typically, I wouldn't attach images to that email because a lot of times that'll just go to spam or something.
Yeah.
So I just have a link to my website, like so simple. A link to my website, and then quick text. So the text would be something like, I am a fine art photographer. I do book covers from time to time. I would love to talk about creating something for you or selling something to you. You know, just like say what you want right off the bat.
Yeah, and keep it simple because they're
So
not going to read a
simple.
long, crazy email with all these paragraphs. Yeah.
I mean, my new goal in life is to like teach how to write a good email.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's such a good skill.
Yes.
And it's so hard. Like
It is
seems
hard.
simple, but to like narrow down and like really only say what needs to be said can be hard.
It's hard. There's a really famous quote about that. Like the hardest letter to write is a short one.
Yes,
It is. It's so true. So yeah, keep it simple. Just say who you are, what you want specifically, because like companies don't know what you want. Like for us, it's obvious. Like we're like, yeah, we want to give you our images,
you my work,
but they don't know that. So
Yeah.
it's so important to just say, my name is blank. I am this type of photographer. And you know, connect yourself to them in some way. So instead of just like, here's my work, say something like, I love such and such author that you represent, or I love this book cover that you did, and I think my work would fit well with you. And just let them know that you've spent the time to research them, and it's not just a generic email.
You're not sending that to
sent out.
everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you want to work with them specifically.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
I mean, there are thousands and thousands of publishing companies and music producing places. I don't even know what the word is for that. Not that, but you know, people that make music and bands and artists, labels, and so many different places. So it, you know, the opportunities are very much out there.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful.
My pleasure. Yeah. So these are this set of images. This is what we're going to be really focused on today. Are some of these images. I want to sort of break down what they look like and in Photoshop and how we got through that process of working with a publishing company, because it can be challenging, it can be really scary, it can be really weird. And so I just want to talk through how in the world you go from pitching to a company to creating a cover and having that get finished and on bookshelves.
Do you read the book before you create the cover?
I don't typically.
Okay.
I wish that I could say that I did.
Yeah. Do they give it to you, or do they just give you a synopsis?
They give me a synopsis.
Okay, so you don't even have the full book.
No.
Okay.
I don't have the full book. And sometimes I'll ask follow-up questions like, I need to know what this character looks like, or I need to know like what's the most important setting that you're going that you want me to capture in this book.
Yeah.
But most often they send a synopsis, and then they'll also send me my own images and say, this is what we were inspired by. Like this is why we came to you. Now can you do something like this, but for the synopsis?
Yeah.
And that's actually, for all of the images that you see right now, that's exactly what happened. So they actually pulled other images of mine and said, we like this, now can you do this, but slightly different?
Yeah.
And so let me show you a little bit
That's really helpful.
of that.
I've had clients do that too, and it's really nice to be like, okay, like this is the style, because you know you have slightly different like pieces in all of your work, and so to know like this is exactly what they're going for of your own work is really helpful.
And from a business standpoint, that should be a question that we're all asking our clients too. You know, can you show me which images of mine you connected to?
Yes, that's a really good question to ask them.
And it's so helpful, you know, because then you know that you're not going to disappoint them if you can get it close to that thing.
Yes, yeah.
And it's hard, particularly when you're working with other artists, publishers, authors, bands. They're all artists in their own way. And even down to the people who design the book cover, there are so many different people who have their hand in it. So it's so important to keep in mind that you're not the only artist in this process, and it's a true collaboration. So like this is an image that they had pulled and said, we want you to do something very similar to this picture, but it has to be different for our book cover purposes. And I said, okay, what do you need to be different? What's going on that you don't like about this? And they said, okay, well, we need it to be pulled back more, like it's too close to the subject.
Sure, there's not going to be space for text.
Exactly. We need to have a lot more sky up there. That's really important for us. And so there were different elements that I knew I couldn't keep in this image, as well as the character description. Like they said, well, this is me. So they said, well, your hair's too light. We need someone with dark hair. We want to try different colored dresses. We just want to see. So this was the starting point. And then, as I mentioned before, the final product was here.
Okay, so similar idea of the girl in the ground coming out, but a lot more sky, and there's a tombstone.
There's a tombstone.
And the sky's like different colors.
Exactly.
All of those adjustments.
And they had said, you know, we want sort of like a purplish look in this one, but I had already done the previous 2 book covers in the series, so we had to make sure that the composition was very similar. So the subject had to be in the lower half of the image. We had to have that room for text. We already knew how big the text was going to be and all of that, where the tagline would go. So all of that was already in mind. And then they said, well, we also really want a tombstone. So we have to get that. And so I went around photographing blank tombstones. And it worked out really well.
Tom is asking about pricing. So how would you figure out pricing for a job like this?
You know, we're going to have a really good deep conversation about this right now. So this is a sort of a long answer, but we're going to get into the nitty-gritty because it's so important. For licensing an image or commissioning an image, there are it's like a sliding scale of pricing, and it's not so simple as, say, a print sale where you can just say, this is this much money, take it or leave it. So what I do is this. I set up a low point and a high point of, like, if I were going to license an image where I can sell it to anybody anytime. It's not just for this client. It's non-exclusive.
You could also sell it in your print shop.
I could sell it as a print. I could sell it to another book cover. I could sell it anywhere. So that's like the lowest end of pricing, non-exclusive. I have full rights to sell it again. I would pick a low point price there. So my low point right now is $500. I would sell that image for $500. And yours might be totally different. I'm not going to give you any like guidance on what's appropriate because I think it's a huge scale. But that's where my low point is right now. I would sell for $500. And then depending on what they come back to me and say, like maybe they say, okay, so we want your image, but we need you to not put this image on any book covers for 1 year. Then I would say, okay, well then the price has to go up because I've lost that income potential for that year. So maybe the price goes up to $800 or $1,000. And this is all, you just kind of pick your hallmarks of like, where am I going to put those price points? Sometimes they'll say, well, you can sell it to anyone in any other country, but just not France, you know, because like we want to corner that market. Or maybe like, you know, we want this in Spanish or, you know, like different, totally random things. Sometimes 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, and you can always choose if you want to change your pricing based on if you have the option for another print run of that book. You know, there are all sorts of things that you might want to negotiate within there. And then based on that sliding scale of where you're allowed to use that image and for how long, you go to the high end of like, we want this image exclusively, you can never sell this image again, then you would pick a high point. And so my high point is $5,000 typically for licensing a book or an album cover or something like that. Forever. And the prices, I would say, really just choose whatever sits right with you. Like whatever you feel like you can let that go for, go ahead and do that. And I will say that the licensing world, book covers, album art, things like that, often does not intersect with the print world. So, so like even if I exclusively sell an image for a book cover, I always have a clause in my contract saying I can also sell this as a limited edition print. And so I keep that separate. But within the licensing world, that's kind of where you want to be. And so, so 500 to 5,000 is my personal range. Yours might be different. But I hope that that's helpful at least to know what you have to consider within that licensing.
That's really helpful. Has your pricing changed as you have like grown in your skills?
Definitely. And you know, it's kind of an interesting thing because once you really start in with book covers and things like that and you gain those contacts, you'll learn that all of your contacts have a bigger contact.
Yes.
And so once you sort of work your way up, it's really, really smart to start pricing yourself into the market that you're moving toward. A lot of people will start with a smaller company like I did, and my pricing was about $100 to $1,000 at that point. And that was great for that market. It fit really well.
Yeah, their budget and what they could do,
But then we started working with, I said we, it's really just me.
Yeah.
I started working with different larger companies where they would come to me with a budget and say, this is how much we have to spend. What does that get us?
Yeah, what can you do for that budget?
Exactly.
And it makes sense too because that with a bigger company, that cover is going to be seen by so many more people. It's going to sell them so many more books.
Exactly.
And so it does make sense too that as the company is bigger, like they should be paying more for all the more eyes that are going to see it.
Exactly. And you know, it's also great to look up the author or the band, because if they're a best-selling author and they already have books published, you know that they're giving that author a bigger budget than somebody who hasn't published before or didn't sell a lot. So that's good to know too. Like do your research and know and ask for those details up front before you just give a price, because it can change.
Do you usually ask for their budget before you give them a quote, or do you say this is my quote?
Yeah, I try never to ask for budgets.
Okay.
They give it to me sometimes.
Okay, yeah.
And other times I like to just go in with my price, and then they might come back and say, well, that's not within our budget. And then I'll ask what is, and we'll work from there. But instead of allowing them to lowball me and say, well, this is our budget, no way. Yeah, I start with my prices first.
Sure, okay.
So like these images that you're seeing now, they were actually remade book images. So this series sold really well, and they wanted to do like a new edition with a new cover.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And so I knew that they had a budget for that because obviously it sold so well that they wanted to have a new book cover and redo it. So that was really good to know that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Another thing that I want to mention with this particular series is that the image of the House of Furies here, this image was actually an image that I sold that I'd already made. So like years ago, in I think 2012, I made this image, and they came to me and they said, we love this image. Could we use it for this book cover? And I said, of course, let's work out the details.
Sure.
And we did. And so that's an example of an image that was licensed from me, that I made and then was licensed. The next two images here were commissioned images.
So they came to you and said, we liked that first image that we bought from you. Can you make new ones that are going in that same theme?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they came to me, they said, we like these images of yours. They don't quite work with the composition and the character. Can you redo them? And so that's how I made these. So that's a totally different pricing structure.
Right. Would you price higher for that?
I would price higher.
Making new work is a lot more effort than like the one that you'd already made.
Exactly. Yeah. And so typically I'll price that between $3,000 and $5,000.
Okay.
And they almost every time will come to me with a price. So like for commissions, they'll come to me and say,
they kind of know what they can spend.
Right. They'll say, our budget is $5,000. Can you do this for that amount? And typically you have to factor in all sorts of things like, do you have to rent a studio? Do you need to hire a model? And that comes out of that budget.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I work with commissions. And when I do commissions for individual people, which we'll talk about in a second, I set one price and then they get one image for that price. Right. And so I'll talk more about that in a second when I open that folder.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That is so helpful. We are going to keep talking about this in just a few minutes, but we are just about on Chat and Win. So it is time for Chat and Win. If you asked questions in the feed, we might not have seen them, so make sure you ask them again after Chat and Win because there's going to be so many people chatting. We want to make sure we hit on those. So jump in the feed and say hi, and you're going to have a chance to win stickers from Sticker Mule, and we'll be right back. All right, we are back. We are just waiting to see who is going to win some stickers from Sticker Mule. So we are waiting on that, and then we're going to get right back into our conversation with Brooke about pricing, licensing, commissions. all of those things. So keep your questions coming and make sure to ask a question again if we didn't touch on it because we just might have missed seeing it. Hello. Wow, so many people. Keisha says, I love composites. Samantha says, enjoying this live session.
Yay.
Hello. San Antonio. Hi, Keita. Hi, Ariana. Oh, Ariana. Congratulations. You will get a message on Behance about how you can redeem your stickers from Sticker Mule. And if you didn't win, you can go to this link right here, stickermule.com/AdobeLive19, and you can get 10 stickers for $1. So super fun. Thanks, Sticker Mule.
Yay.
Cool. Well, we will get back into it. I'm here with Brooke. If you missed her introduction, she's a fine art photographer. She does a lot of self-portraits and beautiful fantasy pieces. And so she's talking a lot today about the business side of that and how she works with commissions for book covers, for album covers, for all those kinds of things. Tomorrow we're going to talk more about working with galleries, right, and selling prints. So you definitely want to stick around, watch again tomorrow, same time. So yeah, feel free to ask questions. If you have questions that we missed or more that you want, Lisa is asking, are you self-taught or did you take classes?
I am self-taught in Photoshop, and we're going to get into Photoshop in just a little bit here, and I'll show you that my editing process is a little bit off. like a little bit of a hack job in some ways because I am self-taught and I found kind of strange ways of doing things right from the beginning. But I think it's important to know that there are so many ways of doing something, but not only that, I mean, you should find what resonates with you.
Yeah, what works for you and for your specific work.
Exactly.
It's going to be different.
I've had so many people try to teach me Photoshop and it just doesn't, it goes right through me and like I could never work like that. And something that I think that we don't think about often enough is how much joy does your process bring you? And if clicking a certain thing in Photoshop doesn't bring you joy, then why do it? You know? So find a way to do it that you love. And my process, as you'll see, is very painterly in that
which makes sense with your work.
It does,
looks like paintings almost.
You know, it's how your brain works. I think like a lot of photographers that I know have this beautiful ability to think in terms of pieces, like compositors do. Like put a piece here, put a piece here, and I don't do that very easily. I think much more in terms of what's the background, and then what can go on top of that, and on top of that, and I do it like layering paint on a canvas more than putting things together so much. So I'll show you that process. But yeah, I'm self-taught in Photoshop, proudly so, but of course YouTube is always helpful.
Yes, YouTube is great, and so many Adobe Live replays that you can watch too to learn how other people work. Some people are asking, Sim's asking what your favorite book cover is, and then Denise is asking what's your favorite commission, which I guess could be the same thing.
Right, it could be, but I have two different answers.
Okay,
so
I would love to see that.
Let me show you. My favorite, I actually think that these are my favorite covers.
I love those.
And particularly the middle one was really special. We actually used images of snakes coming out as the vines or as the roots for the tree, and that was really interesting to do. But I love the way that this one turned out in terms of it being a really inviting, warm book cover. But I want to actually share another cover that was my least favorite. I think it's important to share this because this whole process doesn't always turn out like this, where like I could make something that I love and then it ends up on a book
especially
cover.
When you're working for someone else, right?
Exactly.
It's for a client. It's what they need and want. Yes.
So this is an image that I think turned out great, and I think that this author is a beautiful writer, but this image was kind of like my nightmare of book covers in a lot of ways, because we had a very, very specific character that we were creating for who was Chinese American. And so casting the right model for that became such a challenge. Just too many people making the decisions. Like, one person would love this girl and another person wouldn't. And so I ended up reshooting this cover 7 or 9 times, like something like that, just going out again and again and again and reshooting it. And she was supposed to be a girl laying under the ground.
Okay.
And after 9 months of this, of just going back and forth, they ended up just wanting a rose underground.
Oh my goodness.
And so it's not, I'm not saying this is a bad cover, but it definitely didn't tick all the boxes of being creatively fulfilling for me because of that process.
When something happens like that where you have to keep going out and keep reshooting and they're not happy, does your pricing change, or is it okay?
Yes, it does. I try really hard to let people know up front, this is what you get for this price.
Okay.
And so they knew that they got 1 shoot and 3 edits. So I would do up to 3 re-edits of that image.
Yeah.
And then after that, we start over with the pricing. So after that, it's another set amount of money plus the 3 edits.
Okay.
And this ended up getting much more confusing than that because it was re-edits,
so
but
many
then
different
like,
things.
we'd shoot and they'd be like 10 more re-edits. And so we ended up having to change the pricing structure for that.
Okay.
But yeah, and that's why setting a price is so hard for something like this because it's really, you know what, people can say all the time, no, set your pricing, do this, but I can't help but feel in my experience that it's an intuitive process, that you start the process with somebody, you get to know them, you understand their needs, and then you start to adjust based on how you're working together.
Yes,
I don't know if that's like the professional thing to say, but it's the honest thing to say, which is like, I can't tell you it should be this. It might change.
Yeah.
And it did for this. It changed the whole way through.
Yeah. And sometimes, and maybe this isn't professional either, but like you're saying, like you adjust towards that client. And sometimes if you know somebody is going to be more difficult, they're going to take more of your time, even just in emails and kind of their neediness in a way. Like, you should raise your prices for that person because it's going to take more of your time. It's going to take your time away from other work that you're doing. And so I would say that's the smart way to prices.
Yes.
You kind of tell right away if someone's going to be, more of a handful than others.
Exactly.
So,
So these are some of my commissioned pieces. And so this one is not commissioned. This is an image that you can probably tell a couple people have come to me and said, we like this image. Can you recreate this for us?
Yeah.
And so this ended up, and which is another, let me go on another slight tangent and just say that creating personal work like this can get you these big commercial jobs a lot of the time.
Creating the kind of work that you would want to create for commercial. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I created this, and it was I loved making it. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
Put it out there online, and it just so happened that one of the authors that worked with the publishing company saw this picture and wanted this picture on a book cover. And that's how this evolves sometimes, is just make something that you love, put it out there, and then let it be known that you're available.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
I created this image, and then a little while later, I had a client contact me, a woman named Adrienne. She's lovely and beautiful. She contacted me and she said, I'm not a company, I'm just a normal person, but I would love to just be in your art.
Oh, cool.
And that's how I take commissions mostly, is not from people who want to guide the photo shoot, but just who's willing to be part of my process.
I love what you're doing, and I want to be involved in that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I created this image for her, which
beautiful.
was really, really similar, shot in the same space, just slightly different. And she was able to take this home for herself. And then I did a few others for her. So these are all of the images that she and I created that day.
And these are just for her, like
just
her
for
personal,
her. Exactly.
That's so cool.
Exactly.
Wow.
And we talked about different concepts and what might look good and what would be the best for her, and that's what we came up with. And so for a commission like this, I would offer a couple different things.
Yeah.
A set number of images, which I have to say I'm the worst. I will always quote for one image and then shoot 6.
Yeah.
I just always do it.
It's hard.
And it's like, you get in the moment and you're so excited. But also from a business standpoint, I would rather have more to offer and make less money than charge a lot and then not shoot enough and then fail at producing what they want. So for her, I made 6 images, and then I gave her one print of the image of one of the images of her choice. But this is actually my favorite commissioned image that I've ever created, to finally answer the second part of your question. Well, really your only question.
Yeah.
And this is one of my favorites because this is just like a great match made in heaven type of situation. The woman in this image, her name is Jenny Lawson. She is a best-selling author and talks a lot about anxiety and just different mental health issues. And she actually found me because I started sharing online about how I suffer from anxiety, social anxiety, stuff like that. And she felt really connected.
Relate to you. Yeah.
And so I came out to her house. This was shot in Texas. And we started talking, and we had all these images in mind. And as I was walking around our house, I noticed this bird cage. And I said, I know that we don't have this planned, but could we just take this bird cage out into the forest and do something with it? Because I knew that it would resonate on a deeper level. Yes, it is, Lindsay. Yeah. And so what essentially we did was I photographed her sitting up in a tree up high, and had her, like, I really just had her wrapped in a bunch of fabric, so I had the fabric moving, and then I photographed the bird cage with a smoke emitter going off all around her, or all around the bird cage, and then I edited her into the bird cage. And this really resonated because it was about this feeling of being trapped, about anxiety, about wanting to be free, about being a beacon of hope for people. And so this was my favorite commissioned image that I think that I've ever done. And here are a couple more. So like this is an art piece that I did, an installation for just like a, what's it called? Like a mall area, I guess. It's like a Whole Foods and a couple other things.
Oh, wow.
And so in the lobby area of this shopping center, they wanted a piece that would be, I think, 14 feet tall by 25 feet wide. And so I had to do something new for this. I had created an image with blue tutus jumping all around years ago, but it was not very high quality. Like I couldn't blow it up that big.
Work as a large image.
Yeah, and so this is what ended up happening, where I photographed each subject super, super close. So each person took up a whole, like 7,000 pixels or whatever. And then I started expanding the frame out from there, so that this ended up being massively large, to be able to be 25 feet
That's gorgeous.
Wide. And so that's in North Carolina. If anyone wants to find it, it's in Charlotte, North Carolina.
That's so cool.
Never seen it though.
Sam is asking if you have any sort of thumbnailing process that you do before you commit to an idea. You want to walk us through like how you like develop your ideas and think through the process?
Yes. My process is very much about introspection. So I start pretty much with a pen and paper, blank piece of paper. And I try my very best not to be inspired by a ton of outside inspiration. So like, I would rather work in a blank white room than go into a really ornate room or something with beautiful pieces in it, because I want to put every single thing in that image as mine, that I have chosen. Yes. And so I start with a blank page. I start with theme. So I'll write down like rebirth or death or like something that I like. And I'll start to think of all the visuals that come to mind for that theme. So like if it's rebirth, maybe I'll write down circle, because that's a symbol that I represent, a visual. Maybe I'll write down blood. Maybe I'll write down water, or just like anything that comes to mind. And then I'll start to piece that together into a composition. So like, okay, well, if I'm going to use a circular shape and water and red, how would I use those things? And I'll put that into my mind of like, visually what would feel right. So maybe maybe my image would be looking down into a bunch of water where I have somebody curled up in fetal position to represent rebirth, wearing maybe like a red piece of fabric that's spiraling around them in the water, or something like that, to represent rebirth through the color red, which symbolizes blood, the circle pattern, which symbolizes the cycle of life, and the fetal position, which symbolizes birth. So that would be like how I would start to put together an image, and then I go do it.
And you're really having all of the elements in the image kind of like a part of that theme.
Yeah, exactly.
Very intentionally.
Exactly. I mean, I really try not to leave anything out. I know that I do. Like, we always overlook things.
Do it perfectly every time.
But I do try. I try to say like, even as far as what's in the very, very background of this image, and should that be there.
Little details.
Exactly. And it makes all the difference. But I will say that with my process of coming up with I don't know, like exactly what my image will look like. I really try to keep it as simple as possible.
Okay.
And that's something that you'll notice generally with my images is that it's, this is a bad example, but typically one subject in the center of my frame, really clean backdrops, and then just one focal point in my images. And
I noticed that.
And I think that that's very important to me. And you'll see that like as I scroll through these, almost all of them is just like a single focal point, really clean backgrounds.
That one individual,
Exactly. So there's not a lot distracting from what's going on. It's just really, really simple.
Cool. Well, do you want to jump into Photoshop for a
I would
little
love
bit?
to.
We are going to look at some of her process in Photoshop. I want to remind you guys that we have our Daily Creative Challenge coming up. We're going to review those in about 43 minutes. So if you would like some feedback from Brooke, make sure to submit those in the challenge tab right above the chat. And today we are mixing and matching plant images to create a botanical design. So really excited to see what you guys make, and we are gonna get to that in about 40 minutes. So make sure you submit.
So let's start here since we've really taken a look at several parts of this image so far, and I'll just show you how this came to be. So I actually did several poses. This wasn't finished. It was just the mock-up sort of to show the composition and the poses. So we tried this pose with her hands on the ground. We tried this one with her hands up. This one with one reaching back, and that looked really weird. One with one hand and one hand on the ground. And so we tried a lot of different things for this particular book cover. These were some of the options, like I said, the 4 poses, tried without a sky and just some fog in the background, which I actually much preferred to the final version, but you know, we worked together, one without the tombstone.
Are these, would you show the client something like this and have them choose?
Exactly, like I showed them this versus this, you know, one without. I showed them the sky, I showed them I showed them all of these things. And I try to be really thorough in that process of just being really honest of like, this is where we're at now, but before I commit, I need to know, does this work or does this not work?
All the finishing
Exactly.
pieces.
So let's just deconstruct this Photoshop process, which is gonna look really weird. But here's the blank canvas. And then I'm starting with actually this really funny image that I took years ago of somebody laying on the ground, and I just kind of got rid of him a little bit there. Just a little. This was just the side of like a hill that I've on a hike that I was on that I added in.
So do you have just kind of a store of images, all the images that you've taken, and you search through them like when you need a specific texture or specific like a grounds?
And like here, for example, I keep them with me. So like I always have like a field and a beach and just, you know, like
constantly
different subjects.
You are.
Exactly. Exactly. So lots of, I just keep a bunch of stock. There's the texture, you know, that I'll use. I always have that with me. And so here I'm just trying to build up the image a little bit. So we're adding in any necessary elements like the field, the grass, just different things that I might need. These are curve adjustment layers, so just changing the shading, things like that. Some more grass, trying to get rid of that man. And then a sky. And now it's all really rough. Like, now what if I showed this to a client, right? Like they think I was crazy.
What are you? Yeah, we didn't pay for this.
Exactly. And that's how all of these look pretty much when they start, because I'm just piecing it together to see, is it gonna work or is it not gonna work at all? There's that little, my attempt at putting some fog in, which is literally just a brush tool, brushing over. You know, nothing very fancy there. Adjusting the colors. And it's a long process, this edit. So there we've got my very yellow subject added in because I've already desaturated the background, so she looked a little crazy, but we'll get her in.
Desaturate her.
Yeah, hopefully. Adding shading, super important to this process. But all the while that I'm doing this, I'm really thinking about the composition of a book cover and where does she need to be to make enough space for the text. Because that's different. Like I work from square format always. All of my images, aside from commissioned images, are a square. So it's a little challenging for me actually to start thinking about that. But at the same time, my normal sensibilities have to come into this. So like adding hair on and adding dress so that there's a sense of movement in this image so that it's not just stagnant.
Right.
Which when you're trying to sell a book cover for someone, essentially I'm the person who's selling the books.
Yeah, people, I mean, I buy books based off the cover all the time.
Yeah, and you know, like as artists, I think we should.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like let's support the artists who are making those book covers that are great. And so I know from experience that if I'm gonna sell a book cover, it needs to have this sense of motion to it. Like it can't just be still.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I wanna have the hair moving and the dress moving and just like anything that I can to invite the viewer in and make it feel like there's forward motion in the story of the image and in the book.
Okay.
So adding new clouds in. Now at this point, I would have shown the client probably what you see here.
Okay.
So like the clouds that I've added in, this composition, it's not totally shaded yet, it's not colored yet, but this is where the client would really start to see some progress and make their choices about pose and things like that. Got her legs popping in there. We're almost to the top, I swear. They take a long time.
Someone asked earlier how many layers you had, and so now they can see a lot
yeah, I hope
of
someone's
layers.
counting.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But I guess a typical image for me would have anywhere from 20 to 100 layers or so, which is a big range, I know, but it depends. And something like this I probably could have done with less layers, but there were a lot of tweaks back and forth with the client, so different things got added in. And particularly when I'm working for a client, I really don't like to, I like to include all the layers and just keep them.
Right.
So that if they say, can you go back to that?
Yes,
then I
you
can.
have it, and you have the ability to go back.
Exactly.
Non-destructive.
Which is really, I learned the hard way about that.
Yes, that's that's a good tip.
You know, never flattening, never deleting. Just put them aside, take the little eyeball off. You know, they don't have to be there. But
Tom's asking, what are the pixel dimensions of this?
Good question.
Piece?
Let's find out. If we go into image size, so it's the long side is 10,000 pixels. The width is
6,000.
Yeah, and you can see this is like it's grainy at that size.
Yeah.
And that's okay, you know, to be like that, but it's going to be for a book cover, so it's going to be super tiny.
It's going to be small, but it is going to be printed, so you have to have high resolution.
Exactly. Yeah. And you always want to think about the potential for billboards, buses, you know, whatever might happen, and you never know. So I just sold a book cover recently that ended up being put on billboards, buses, like trains, all over the place. And it was huge, massive. Yeah. So it was a really good thing that I went bigger instead of smaller. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I shoot my images as sort of really close composites. So like I shot my subject really close up. In fact, I shot her just her upper body and then just her lower body so that she would be super high resolution when I put her in, and I could build more pixels out. Yeah. And so that's quite important.
Sam is asking, how important do you consider Instagram and social media to what you do?
I have such mixed feelings about this. I think that of course it's helpful because certainly some clients have found me that way. Certainly authors do and things like that. And I'll answer this better tomorrow, I think. But the real answer is that galleries and things like that, like my bread and butter, they don't care at all. Like at all. And in fact, a lot of my galleries have asked me not to share sometimes about certain things that we're doing because they just want their art buyers to come and they don't want like people of the internet to come. And it's like, which I absolutely hate that thought process. But it's just how their brains work, I guess, sometimes. And so it's great, of course, but you know, like people had businesses before the internet, and if the internet disappears, we will continue to have businesses. So like, is it necessary? No. Is it helpful? Of course. But not in every situation and not necessarily. You know, like the amount of jobs, like paid jobs that I've gotten because of having a following have been shockingly low, like compared to what I would even think I would get because of it. And that depends. Like, I don't do any influencer jobs and things like that, so that also makes a difference if you're willing to do that.
Do people come to you for those kinds of jobs?
Yeah,
or you just don't take them on because it's not what you're wanting to focus on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can't share my message, then I won't share a message. So that's just my personal philosophy. I have nothing against it. It's just what I want. You know, for me, it all comes back to this idea of legacy and like, how do you want people to remember you? And so every single job that I take goes back to that question of like, does this fulfill my legacy right now? And if it does, then I take it, and if not, then I don't. And so that's kind of how I try to operate.
I think that's really cool to have a question like that to ask yourself when you're deciding to take work or not take work.
Yeah.
Because if you take on every single thing that comes your way, you're not going to have time
Right.
to do all the things that you actually want to be doing.
Exactly.
And so you have to have that kind of filter to be like, okay, does this like match up with my vision, my purpose, what I'm wanting to do? And so, coming up with a question that you can ask yourself, that's a really good tip.
It's all about alignment, you know, like making sure that this job is in alignment with your values and ideals right now.
Absolutely.
And that can change, and that's great if it does.
Yeah.
But knowing your boundaries and knowing if this particular job is going to fulfill you and fulfill the role that you're trying to play in the world, that's really important, I think.
That's awesome.
So I just want to take you through this edit really quick.
Let's do it.
Of this other image, and this is that split open tree. So you can see, like, just based on this, that was the original size image. Like, that's a full size image.
Yeah.
And then if we get into image size, you can see that the canvas is actually about, 9,300 pixels tall. So I expanded out from there by adding on the tree, and I just shot this tree close up and just took separate images all around the frame, like click, 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 click. And I expanded the frame from there.
Tom is asking if you involve attorneys when you're negotiating licenses.
I don't. I have lots of blind trust in people. It's I don't know if it's good or bad, but actually my best friend is an attorney, so I am lucky to be able to throw some questions her way, but in general, I just try to be smart, and I've taken so many notes about all the times that I've been burned in deals, and
your contract changes over time, right? The more clients you have, the more you have in your contract.
And I just keep it simple. So I write all of my own contracts, but I've also passed those through my friend who's a lawyer.
Yes.
And she's quick to say, like, if you keep it simple and like the terms are very clear, then it should be fine.
Right.
And so I keep my terms super clear. Like, this is what you get for this money. Yeah. And it works out pretty well. I've never been in a legal battle before. I like to think that, like, I just try to smile and, like, be really nice, and then people are fine with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not good advice. Don't take that advice.
Well, but if you are, like, nice to work with,
just be
people are not going to fight with you as much. That's just life. Be a nice person.
You know what? This is kind of a tangent as I put these million layers on. But I used to have an assistant who would do like a lot of the emailing for me and stuff. And then we stopped working together, and so I then had to be the one to go back to doing all that work. And I was really bad at emailing. Like, I chose to have an assistant because I was so bad at it. And so I was like, okay, I don't have any help. I'm gonna do it all myself, and I'm gonna do it great. Like, I'm just gonna be the best at this. And so I started a 24-hour email policy, and I started responding super quick to everybody, even if it was like kind of embarrassing, where they would send the email and then I would like respond right away. Like, clearly I'm just on my computer. And over the past 2+ years since I started doing that, I have had like over half a dozen companies say that they want to work with me again and again because I'm so organized and so quick at responding to them. And so, like, they're not even saying, it's because of your imagery, it's so beautiful.
It's because of your customer service at the end of the day. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I mean, I had one publishing company be like, we would rather hire you for everything that you could possibly do because other people are so horrible to work with. And it's like,
that's how you get referrals too, right? Is if you build that like trust and that relationship, people are going to be like, I want to refer you to other people because that's their reputation when they make a referral, right? So if they can trust you.
Yeah, and so I think that that's almost of equal importance. If you can get in the door, obviously that takes the work to get in the door, but if you can get in and then show that you are a pleasure to work with and you're going to be accommodating and you understand their vision, I mean, I think that truly makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, are we at the top yet?
Almost there.
Almost.
We have about 30 more minutes until we're going to review some daily creative challenges, so make sure you submit those. And then Kieta was asking, how do you practice getting better at lighting? And so do you want to share about your lighting?
I would love to. Oh my gosh. And that's what we're doing right now in this edit, is popping on some lighting effects and shading and coloring.
Because you shoot all natural light, right?
All natural light.
All natural light outside. So then in Photoshop, you're adding in that dramatic lighting.
Color and light. And so let's actually start on this image right here. I'm just going to pop in with my pen. And so what I'm doing here with lighting and things like that is working like a painter. So for example, I shoot in overcast lighting, only overcast.
Okay.
So it has to be either before the sun has come up or after it's gone down or an overcast day.
Right.
But I live in Arizona,
nice, flat,
so it's
easy.
like I don't find that very often.
Right.
Every time I go to England, I think, why don't I live here? But so I am typically working with a really small window of shooting time. So instead of bringing lights and like doing all of that, then I work with this really beautiful magic hour light. So it's super just dull.
Yeah.
I like it dull.
Yeah.
And I even work to make it flatter in Photoshop. So what I'll typically do is a curve layer where I'll actually bring the highlights down to be gray and then the shadows up to be gray.
Right.
And I'll create this almost grayed out look so that there's no true white or true black point.
Okay.
And this helps me to create a more painterly look because a lot of classic paintings don't use a true white or a true black. It's like some muddied in between color. And then I'll only work from the mid-tones of my curve to create that contrast that we might be looking for.
Okay.
And that's really, really helpful to me to do something like that. So let's see. Oh, geez, where are my layers? There we go. And then if I'm creating, so like let's say I've done that, that's my first step in the lighting adjustments, then I'll use my lasso tool and I'll start to just draw in where I think the light should be and subtract it where it shouldn't be. So like around the outside edges, you know, I might get rid of some of the light there, but really I want to put it on the subject. So I'll just choose like an area like this where I think the eye should go. And just super organic, like really wavy lines and whatever I think. But I will almost never use the elliptical marquee tool or something like that because that's just gonna be a perfect circle.
You want it to be organic because
super organic.
Nature is organic and not perfect.
And then I'll feather it. So I'll choose like a really big feather. We'll do 500 pixels. And then I'll do another curve adjustment layer. And within there, I can then make that area brighter, maybe add some contrast so that the eye really goes to that spot.
It makes it really pop.
Exactly. And so now we can see like with just those two changes, we've already changed the lighting dynamics quite a bit. We're changing where the eye goes in the frame.
It's a lot more dramatic too.
It is, exactly.
Which
and
for a book cover or something like that, you
need
want
it.
that like, drama.
You really need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm typically thinking about with my lighting is just highlighting the subject. And another little tool tip that I love to do is to make sure that the subject is the brightest thing that has the most contrast.
Okay.
Because contrast, like people always say, well, the brightest part is where your eye goes, and that's true, but also the part with most contrast is where your eye goes. So I'm going to feather my selection that I just made on her just a bit. And then in curves, I'll do the same thing where like I'll make her quite a bit brighter and then give her a little bit more contrast because the more I do that, the more, look, like your eye just keeps going to her.
Right, especially with that red, then it's like, wow, it stands out so much.
Exactly. Now, obviously there are some errors here, like I included her hand, I would erase that because we don't want, you know, this like super
Blown
bright
out look,
Yeah. But the good thing is that I can always use my my little adjustment layer there. So I have a layer mask already created. I can just delete it right there, just start erasing, get rid of that wherever the highlights were too much.
Right.
And so that's how I typically deal with lighting is I put it all together, I make it really dull, flat, and then I change the lighting dynamics within that.
Cool. Thank you for showing that.
Ah, yes.
Ellie is asking, do you shoot smart when you shoot things like the tree, or do you take 100 photos and hope for the best? And then she clarified, by shoot smart, I mean, do you think about things like perspective and all of that when you're shooting?
I am really big on getting the shot like once and done.
Yeah.
And so, and like I said, I'm not spontaneous. I actually don't even like photography really, like at all. So like for me to take my camera out, I'm like, this is boring. Like I'm not into that. So I'm not gonna take 100 pictures of anything. I don't know if I've ever taken 100 pictures of anything.
Because you know exactly what you want in your head, right, before you even go.
And here's a good example of that. You know, like these are the raw images that I used for that shot. And so like this was the tree that I used for one of my images. And I shot a few different options knowing that I would need them. And this is just the top part of a tree. And it's really helpful to have these stock images, but in general, I'll shoot maybe like 3 different angles of a tree, like one high up, one medium, one low, just so that I have it. And that's really smart to do for anything. I do that with people, like if I'm gonna composite them and I'm not sure how it'll match, I just do a low shot, a medium shot, and a high shot.
So you have different perspectives.
Different perspectives. Yeah. I don't do different exposures or things like that because I know that that's adjustable later.
Yeah.
I don't really worry much about exposure ever, pretty much. Since I shoot in overcast, I could really just use auto exposure, honestly, and it would be fine because it's gonna find that balance, but so this is some of the stock that I brought with me to create an image today. Same with our subject here. We've got our subject. I just chose one image shot from middle height, like right at the center of her. Here she is running. We've got some hair moving, some dress moving, and that's pretty much all the images that I would need. Now for a book cover, I'll shoot a lot more than that, but still not 100 images. But I'll shoot maybe a dozen to give different options, a dozen different dresses, a dozen different hairs,
placements,
things
and
like
all of
that.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna use these images to throw them in Photoshop and see what we can make.
I'm looking for a question that was there earlier, but maybe it's gone now. Someone was asking there we go. Marcus was asking how often do clients return back to you for more work? So how often are you getting repeat clients?
Most of the time. Okay. Actually. I mean, I used to be really good with putting myself out there, and now I'm just not.
Yeah, because you don't need to as much, right?
Yeah, but it's still bad. Yeah. You know, like we should still hustle. But I think I've just put my efforts into other things lately, and so I've stopped, and so I kind of have a lot of repeat clients.
You have other focuses right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I work with, I guess 3 different publishing companies most frequently that I sort of have like a yearly conversation with that we go back and forth about. The album work that I do is a lot less consistent, but just to show you an example of that, because I didn't get to open that, this is, for example, this is an opera singer that I did an album cover for, and I had never done that before. I don't work a lot with musicians. This is gonna sound terrible, but I find that they're too creative. Like our amounts of creativity clash too much, and so too many cooks. Yeah. But this was a great experience, and so I was able to do this album cover where we did that was the back of the cover.
That's beautiful.
And that was the front, and so we wanted to have like sort of the same image, but one from behind and one from the front, and that's what it ended up looking like. So that was a great experience, and I do things like that as well. Just not as frequently. So the things that take the most hustle in terms of like chasing down clients like that, I tend not to put my focus on. Like I prefer to work with a publishing company who already has their authors instead of going after music artists and things like that.
Yeah, they are kind of like the gateway, and they're going to be getting you those clients, and you're not having to like negotiate with all the different people.
I love a middleman. Like I am happy to pay an agent or a middleman or anyone who can just a little bit more easily facilitate that deal.
Yeah, well, they know what they're doing, and then you can focus on making the actual work instead of spending your time in all the negotiations.
Exactly. So if we were going to start in Photoshop building an image, let's redo this tree image that we keep going back to. First, I would pick a backdrop, and that might change based on the angle. You know, like if an angle isn't working, the perspective is wrong, then maybe I'll choose a different background. But in general, we have, like I could choose this one, for example, which has that sky. Let's see. We've got, no, that's not really a backdrop, but those are some good roots, aren't they?
Yeah, those are really cool. It's a really cool tree.
let's see, we've got this background. This was shot from a lower angle, and you can tell because you can really see like at the forefront here how out of focus it is, and it was just down a lot lower.
Yeah.
So that's a good option if we have a lower perspective. Let's see, what other ones do we have? We've got this forest area that we could use, which could be an interesting one to play with. And then we've got any others? Nope, that's it. So, which one should we do? We have so many options.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think let's go for this one because I've never tried that before. So let's just see. You know, when we when I'm editing here, I just want to be super clear. Like, I don't have this planned. I want to just like do it with you and see how it goes.
Okay, cool.
So we've got this raw file open, and I'm just gonna take the highlights down because the whites are really distracting me in the background there. So I'm just taking those down a little so it's just less white. And I think that looks good. It's dull, it's gray, it's not an exciting image. That's just what I love. So
yeah, because you're gonna make it more
we'll make it pop
The
later.
magic's gonna happen in Photoshop.
Hopefully. Yes. But you know, even if it doesn't, my favorite thing is just to try and then see what the heck didn't work. And
And then you learn from that.
Exactly. We're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
I'll bring in the foreground as well. So if we want to tilt down, you know, with our frame and add that in, we can absolutely do that. And you can see they're two different colors. They're not even gonna fit together that great, but we'll make it work.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and build our frame, right? We've got this tree situation happening. And if I want to make the tree area bigger, then I'll just add that little part on the bottom, like that. And we'll just start to bring in this image. So I'm just dragging and dropping that.
Okay.
You can see, look at that drastic color shift. It's like, it's really extreme, but that's okay. So I've just lined up this tree, and I don't know if it's totally right, so to get it in place, we'll lower the opacity and just kind of see. Like, it's not going to be perfect, but we can use our arrow keys to sort of see like where this needs to go, what looks good, what doesn't. And it's not going to be right, but it's good enough for now. So take that opacity back up. I'm just zooming out so you can see the whole frame real quick. And I'm going to create a layer mask here, and I'm using my brush tool, and let me just see if we can make this smaller. There we go. There we go. So we can see our colors. So we have black on top, and I'm just going to use this with my brush to start to erase.
Okay.
I'm going to right click, make sure that my hardness is down, because we just want a really nice soft transition here to get this in. And now we'll zoom in to see what's gone wrong with our image, because we can see it. It's wrong, and that's okay. We know how to fix it. So we're going in, I'm gonna click on the actual layer, not the layer mask. And I'm going into Edit, Transform, Warp.
Okay.
And in Warp, we can just start to move the pixels around to match them up with what's underneath. So I'll be able to just sort of nudge that into place. And it's not perfect. I would spend more time on that. Obviously, this is an area of issue, but it's not too bad really for right now. There we go.
Yeah,
see, we'll just
good.
erase what isn't good.
Yeah.
That's always a good solution.
So
I would spend more time on it, but I don't want to waste time with the nitpicks. So I would do that a little bit more. But let's get our tree in.
Okay.
And I see that Kita is asking about lots of female subjects. And that's true because about 90% of my work is self-portraiture.
Sure.
So a lot of it is just me.
Yeah. Like you said, you like kind of working by yourself in the
I do.
In that
love
environment
it.
alone.
I love it.
Yeah.
I also don't know anybody where I live within a 2-hour radius at all. Like I don't know a single person. So I don't really have that many options for models. I'm really, really shy and socially anxious. So I actually get really uncomfortable working with models. So unless it's a really close friend, I just don't do it. My husband is very much off limits. He won't let me do any photos of him. But I'm working on it. I'm working on a new series where I'm going to try to get some men in there.
Oh, cool.
We'll see how it goes.
So it's kind of just like working with what you have in a way.
Exactly.
And that's why self-portrait is so great because you can still create all your art. You don't need to coordinate with a model and all of that, which can be a lot of work in itself.
It can be a lot of work.
So, cool.
So we've got a couple images in here. this is a beautiful tree that I photographed on a hike in Patagonia, actually. And I want to use this tree because it already has the opening, so it already has the natural curvature in it that would create this opening that we want. So let's go ahead and just get this tree in real quick. I'm just gonna select very generally with the lasso tool, just all around the tree, not going along any edges, copying and pasting.
Cool.
Okay, so we've got the tree in, right? That's good. But you know what I notice is that really we want a taller image than we do wide, and we have kind of a square going on here. You see how I naturally do that all the time?
Right, that's what you work with normally.
And even this part of the tree is going off, and I don't want that to happen. So the issue is that I don't have an image of the tree tops. So I can't expand the frame upward that way. But here's what we're gonna do. I think that we should, I like to make my image really tiny on my screen so I can see it fresh.
Okay.
I think that we should just add wherever we want the pixels, like let's say we know we want it to be that tall. Okay. I'm going to add in my layer of fog here and just get rid of the trees because we don't need them for this composition.
Right.
Like I said, I like super simple backgrounds. And this is actually really confusing for me to look at. I don't like there being so many little points of interest in the back. So I'm creating a new blank layer. And on that layer, I'm gonna click my brush tool, make my brush super big, just a really big soft brush, so 0 hardness. And I'm going to Alt-click to select a color in the background, maybe like that. I think that'll be nice. And I'm just gonna paint at 100% opacity, just all over this image.
Okay.
And it's gonna seem kind of weird to do this. I know.
Kind of like you're making the sky, right?
Yeah, we're just making, like, it's just really foggy.
It's so foggy.
Yeah. And I'm going to go in with a slightly lower opacity in the 30% range, a smaller brush.
Okay.
Just get in right around
in
there.
the very bottoms of the trees.
Just at the very bottom. So now we've got this really, really foggy area. And if I want to get rid of any, that's okay. I can create a little layer mask. Just click on my white and then just erase where I think I did too much. And we can do that really, really subtly like I'm doing here at 30% opacity just to get rid of some. But it looks kind of like post-apocalyptic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It looks
so
cool.
we'll go with that. And now we have room for our tree, which I pasted in below our fog. So we have to move that up. And so we've got this tree. And now we're gonna worry in a moment about does it fit well there? Because currently there's no fog on the tree. There has to be some fog on the tree, but we'll worry about that later. So we've got the tree, that's good. Now I just have to erase it. And so my process in doing this is to try to keep it as non-destructive as possible, particularly for a client. Of course, you never want to just like get rid of something and never be able to bring it back if they want it back.
Yes.
So I'm using my layer mask. That's about the most complicated thing I will do in Photoshop. I don't do anything really weird. I just right-clicked on my brush tool and I want the hardness to come up. And what I'm doing is the hardness is here and here. So this is a 0% hardness brush, super fuzzy, 100% hardness, really sharp. And I'm just trying to choose a hardness that matches how in focus the thing that I'm erasing against is. So if the tree is really sharp, like it is, then I would want my hardness to be quite high. And so something around there will work. Switch to black, and I'm, opacity all the way up. And now I can go in and just start to erase. Now the great thing is that you don't know the difference if I do it poorly.
Right.
Trust me, you don't know. So I'm gonna go in and just do this super, super fast. Now I would pay a little bit more attention, but for the sake of this, we're not gonna really be able to see the fact that I'm not like following every little crevice. There are certain parts like in the variations in the bark, I would go in and try to, like make sure that all those details are there. But in general, this is just not, I mean, it can be so fast to do something like this. So, look, we got a tree. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. We got a tree and it's in, and that's great. It's because we have a start, right?
Yeah.
But it's not totally blended. So on that same layer, my layer mask, I'm going to make my brush bigger. We're just gonna blend the floor in by taking the hardness down. And first at 100% opacity, wherever there is a hard edge, I'm just erasing that to start to blend it into the ground a little bit there. So it's just blending, and then with a lower opacity still, we'll just start to really like make sure that it's just a light fade, just like that. So now it's starting to blend. It looks like it could have really been there maybe. I'm gonna save it because I have very bad luck. And then let's go get our other tree. Now this doesn't really fit, right? Like this is a burned tree, totally different place, not the same type of tree, but let's see what we can do with it. So I'm gonna do the same thing, grab it, copy it, bring it in, paste it in. And this was actually shot with a more high resolution camera, so the tree branch is bigger.
Okay.
So we're just gonna bring it down, just make sure that it fits. And somehow we're gonna blend this tree together. Now I do want the tree top to hit the top of the frame because obviously it's just cut off and that would be super weird. Now that it's in though, creating my layer mask, and we're gonna do the same thing to cut it out as fast as we can, because we don't need to bore anyone with this very long
super
process.
Cutting. So Tima's asking, when you touched on this a little bit earlier, but if you want to repeat maybe when you say no to clients, because you have said no to clients before.
Yes.
And maybe kind of share that question again that you ask yourself, but when you're taking on work.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about understanding what you need in your life right now, first of all. I think that there is no shame in taking jobs for the money if that's what you need right now.
Absolutely.
So I will say that. But in general, I ask myself, does this fulfill the legacy that I'm trying to leave right now? So like, you know, part of my legacy right now is to inspire creativity in others.
Yeah.
So if I take a job that won't inspire creativity or imagination or something in other people, then I won't do it.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes to me and they're like, okay, like we talked earlier, you do product photography. And we were talking about that, and like I probably, my brain doesn't work that way in a creative way. And so I probably wouldn't take a job like that because I don't know how to inspire creativity in others with product photography. So it wouldn't make sense for me to do that. So I try to ask, does this fulfill this this legacy that I'm trying to leave right now? Do I want to do it? Like at the most basic level?
Are you excited
honestly,
about the project?
like we don't think enough about that. So many people think that like that idea of do I love this shouldn't factor in if it's like a well-paying job or something. But I tend to disagree with that. So I would definitely ask that question as well. But I do turn jobs down, especially if I've worked with someone before and I know that we're not
a good fit.
Gonna jive well.
Yeah.
I certainly do not bother then.
Absolutely. And then Marcus was asking, have you had clients that provide you with images to work with, or do you always take the photos?
I always take the photos. That's a great question.
Yeah.
No one's ever come to me with that. But I imagine it's a thing.
Would you
have to
work with them if that were the case? I guess it would be very case by case depending on what the images
It would be,
like.
But I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, because it wouldn't reflect like
it wouldn't be
that
mine,
you do.
know, and that's why I tend not to use stock or things like that.
Right.
I shoot all my own stock, and it's just a matter of does it feel like mine or not?
Yeah.
And did I do it? And can I take credit for this? And I don't know. We're artists.
Yes.
So like, you know, pride is a thing, and so I want to like be proud of it and make sure it's mine.
Absolutely.
That's just how I feel though about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a weird tree that we've made. We'll see how this goes. Maybe it will go nowhere. But I think that we need a bigger crack in the tree. Like I think that we should try to widen that up a little bit to make our subject fit in there. And so that's why I brought a little crack in the tree with us.
We have about 6 minutes until we're gonna switch over and review some of the daily creative challenges. The challenge for today is to take botanical or plant images and make a botanical design. And so go ahead and submit those if you haven't already. And then Brooke will be giving some feedback in just about 5 minutes.
Yay!
Yeah.
Okay, so back in Photoshop, I'm gonna take this crack that we already have, and I'm just selecting like generally around the edge there, and that's on our layer 2. So I'm gonna copy that and paste it. And this is a strange thing to do here because it's already there, so why would you do it?
What are you doing?
But I wanna widen it. So like I said, we have this beautiful situation of the tree is already naturally curved there. And so I want to take advantage of that. And we're gonna do that with the warp tool. So I'm going back into Edit, Transform, Warp, and I just wanna start to widen that up just a bit. Make it a little bit taller, a little bit wider. And yes, this is stretching pixels, and yes, we can talk all day about if you like that or not, and I do, so I do it.
So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, to each his own, and obviously this will affect the printing process slightly, of course, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
I feel like you can, I don't know, not that this is technically a rule to break, but you can break rules if you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah. Well, if you know the confines.
Yeah, you understand that this is going to affect things later, so you can work with that and use it to your advantage.
Exactly, exactly. So I'm just reblending the bottom of that tree in. Okay, I'll save that. I also want to get the roots in because like roots like this are so important to me to include because the tree is just kind of sitting there and I want to make sure that there's a flow through the image.
It kind of grounds it.
So we're going to just take in some of these tree roots, same way that we've been doing, paste them in. And just get them over here. And look, it's going to cover up that big white strip.
There we go.
Yay! And so those should sit pretty nicely there. Now the
Yeah.
floor is all different, like I totally recognize that, but that's okay.
You're going to fix it.
We're gonna make it look all right. Why worry ourselves about it? So I'm going to use my brush tool.
Yeah.
Where are you, brush tool? And let's see, a little bit smaller. Just get rid of the hard edges to start because I don't like leaving any of those hard edges just in case I miss something. It's so much nicer to just erase them right away.
Right.
And then I'll go in with a harder brush.
Keita's asking, how do you know when you're ready to take commissions?
If you ask me, I'm never ready to take a commission. I think that I think you just start and then you see how well you cope with it. I don't cope well with it, to be honest. I'm really anxious in a situation with a commission, and that's why I prefer to do things like this, where I can create it by myself on my own, because having a client over my shoulder, I won't cope well with that.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't work with so many musicians, because working with other people is not the process that I love, so I don't collaborate very frequently at all with people. So it's really just a matter of your preference and how you work, but I think that it's never too early to start sending your work out there because people will just say no and then forget about you.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers you.
Yeah.
Or me. Like, trust me, it's the most comforting thing in the world.
And what's the worst they can say? No? Like,
Exactly.
That's it.
And then you go back later and try again, and maybe that'll work or maybe it won't. And so I think, you know, if you're interested in it, try it and do it and get out there. And if you're not, if you're like, oh, this isn't really for me, that's fine too.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
I'm just going in with a low opacity brush in between where the leaves are so that it blends a little bit nicer right through there. And there's this big color shift. You see how yellow this tree is compared to these roots? So we're gonna change all of those colors here. The tree roots are quite blue, and I can see that. Even a little bit, I don't know, cyan. So I'm going to create a curve adjustment layer right above that root, and then I'm gonna pin it down by clicking that little down arrow
square
box
down. Yeah.
icon. I don't know how to describe
Layer.
things.
It like clips into the layer below.
Yes, it's a clipping mask.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to do is go into my RGB and go to the blue curve, because I can immediately see it has less yellow than the rest, which means it has more blue. And let's just take away some blue to add the yellow in, and that helps immediately. And then we can go into red and add some red, make it a little bit warmer if we want, just slight changes. And even maybe it could be a little bit brighter. Oh, that was the wrong direction.
Tom's asking if you typically work in RGB or CMYK.
RGB.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think it really matters. That's not something that I think is a huge deal, but
When you print, are you switching it to CMYK at the end then, or do you just give them an RGB file?
I give them RGB files.
Okay, and you haven't had a problem?
No,
Okay.
no. I work with a great fine art printer in LA,
Okay.
and from day one, I've always just done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, like this is such a great example of how, like I've heard my whole career, you have to do it this way. This has to be like this. This has to be like this. But you know what? things just
Sometimes
work.
It's trial and error too.
Yeah,
you
like
do it one way once,
things
it doesn't
just
work. You do it a different way later.
Yeah, exactly. So I do whatever they tell me.
Sure.
Whatever the printer tells me,
Absolutely.
I will do. But that's not my area of interest, really. So
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the tree roots in, right? That looks not too bad. We still have our white box. We'll fix that later. Or we won't, and we'll just crop it, because it's a book cover. That sounds like a better solution, doesn't it? I'll just get in a couple more tree roots, if we can find some. Maybe just like this one big one.
Let's jump over and do some daily challenge reviews, and then at the end we can get back to this.
Sounds perfect.
Cool. So the challenge for today was to take plant elements and create a botanical design. And I think the theme for this whole challenge is posters. So a lot of these are going to be posters.
Cool.
And you can watch the replay of that challenge if you want to see how Kathleen gave instruction for this. And then there's going to be another one tomorrow at 9 a.m. So make sure you tune in for that. So we can just take a look at some of these.
Awesome.
Cool.
Aww. This is like, I love looking at things that are so incredibly outside of what I would ever think to do.
Yeah.
Like it's so special because we can find such inspiration in things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, what I like about this image is that it's so clean. And I almost wish that it were even more clean. Like, since it's such a stark background and this, like, beautiful flower, I would love to see it, like, even simpler almost on this backdrop or more complicated.
Okay.
Like, more flowers and more things just to really draw the eye in.
One or the other.
Yeah, one or the other. But I love the color combination.
Yeah, I love that pink and that green that, like, really pops.
It works really well to have, like, these, just a couple of super bold colors in the image. And I really like that it's like a slightly pink background, the pink border. Like as a poster especially, it works really well for having that unified color palette.
Cool. Good job. Let's see. Oh, a pun.
I love a good pun.
It's a great one.
You've already won my heart. Oh my gosh.
How fun.
It's awesome. And, you know, it's like, this is the type of image where I wouldn't know how it's meant to be displayed, and that's my only thing is like, I'm not sure if this is supposed to be like one whole self-contained thing, or if it's just a design that we would put out there, or if like, because like when I look at this, I'm like, how do I buy this and put this in my house?
Yes,
and
is it going to be cut down to that white border?
Yeah. And that's what I don't understand about it. So I think that like either more design elements on the outside to contain it, or less on the outside to bring it in would be great, but it's awesome.
Because this right here is confusing, because it doesn't really match the other plants, and it's kind of off by itself, not sure if it's a part of the whole thing, so maybe taking that out, or like adding more of those these leaves to bring it all together. I love that gradient though, it's really pretty.
Yeah, it's very, very beautiful.
Okay, I think that's an old one. Oh, here we go, cut down. There you go.
I
like
love
that
it.
better.
I do too.
That looks really good.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think it's really well done. And yeah, I see like a little...
Yeah, feel free to use my trackpad.
A little green thing there. And so I would just like extend that to make it clear what that little thing is there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's beautiful.
It's good.
And I would totally put that in my house.
I know, it's cute. And the way the plants intersect with the text and like overlay
really well
here
done.
is really nice.
I like the shading a lot.
Yeah, good job. Ooh.
Oh, I love how antique it is. I love that.
Like old pressed flowers. Ooh.
Yeah, I think this one's really beautiful.
Really nice texture.
I think that the pink is a little too bright for me for how antique this image is. And I get the idea of putting one element of pop in there, but I would have maybe toned it down to like more of an orange or maybe like a deeper pink or something like that, just to keep with the antique color scheme. But I think this is super beautiful. I love the texture on there. I love the yellow antiqueness of it.
Yeah. Cool.
Oh, These, pink is not my thing, but you're totally changing my mind today. I really like it.
Yeah. Love these colors.
I like the arrangement of the flowers, the way that some are coming this way and some are going this way. And I think that that's the strength of this image, is that it has this almost like flow upward where it just sort of moves.
There's movement.
Yeah, I like the movement. And I would even just like keep that in mind, that that's a really strong part of this, and just play that up even more. Like how much more movement, like sweeping movement, could we get in this image?
Cool. Another antique look. Ooh, that looks like paper, like a paper texture.
It does, and I really like textures like that, particularly with something simple like this. And I really like the font. And I particularly the little number next to it, sort of like a little diagram. And I would say that if you want it to really look like a diagram image, like this does, like the old stencils and stuff, I would just simplify it even more. Like have one single flower or one single fern, and that would really give that look that is so beautiful. A friend of mine has something very similar to this in her house with that same like paper texture behind it, the diagram. And
those old books.
I just love them.
Yeah.
Bravo on the color too.
The color is really nice.
Oh my gosh, it's so different from all the others.
Yes.
So this is like, the others were so minimal. This one's like packing it in. And actually, I am having like a very interesting, very natural reaction to this, which is that I would actually like the composition to be switched, because the butterfly is so far at the bottom and so close to the text that it's, I wish that they were separated more, so that it wasn't so like, those are the two things that I want to look at. And so I would actually put the flowers at the bottom and weight it down, and then put the butterfly at the top.
And then it would bring your eye up to that butterfly.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it would just scan better. But I really like the collage feel to this, and I also really like the texture on this one. I think that's really strong.
Ooh.
Aww. Oh,
It's
gosh.
so graphical. I love it.
It's like you knew I loved death. Yeah, that's very beautiful.
The text is so, I know this is not like a text review, but the text is so nice.
It is. It's
really
nice.
clean. Yeah.
I really do like the gradient on the background on this one a lot. And it's nice to see a darker background for something floral. I think that's not as common.
That contrast is really good.
Yeah, I really like that. I like so much of this. The only thing that I don't love is that you can see so much of this orb here.
Yeah.
Like I would like it to be up more, like hidden more, like the bigger one is, so that it really feels like it's coming through from this through line from this one to this one to this one. But that's just a flow thing that is totally personal, I'm sure.
Yeah. Cool. It's beautiful.
You know what? This one has like a real digital feel, like because of the text. It feels very like computery.
Even the flowers kind of look like they've been, like, manipulated.
Yeah, like really stark and really like placed. And I think that's probably because of how sharp they are, and also because of how they're like a very different color from the background.
Yeah.
And I do like it. Like something about it is really interesting to me. And I think, but I would just make the choice of like, is that intentional or not? And if it is, go for it. And if it's not, then know that it's happening and dial it back.
And tone back, yeah. Or go for it all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is these are real flowers like in someone's house? I need to buy more flowers.
I don't know, because the pot looks like so real and the flowers look less so, but...
Yeah, that's what makes this interesting is that the flowers look like almost HDR or something, whereas the pot doesn't and the background doesn't. So it's like, I would love to see something like this again taken further, where it's like fantasy meets reality almost.
Right.
And to have those elements brought in where it's like very recognizable as a magical realism type of image. Yeah, but it's lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, push it even a little further. Okay. That's challenge number 3. Here's.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I'm a sucker for dead flowers, so I really like this. I love the antique. I love the texture. I particularly like how spread out this one is. Like, I like that each element has its own space. So I think that's really strong on this one. I like the crisscross as well of the 2 stems. So I think that's nice. And again, I would just say, like, watch where the flowers are crisscrossing, like how this flower is a bit hidden and this one comes down to touch here. I would love to see it all separated.
Yeah.
Just for a cleaner
distracting.
look. Oh, this one's really sweet. So this one is a mirrored image.
Yeah.
Partially, obviously not entirely.
Not the center.
And that in and of itself makes it interesting to like notice the symmetry, but then also be like, wait, this isn't mirrored. Something else is happening here. Yeah, I really like that mirroring actually, and I would just I can't tell if it's like totally straight or if something's off. Maybe that's just me. It feels like tilted slightly.
It does feel like it's heavier on this side.
Yeah, and so I would just make it, like, if you're going to go for symmetry, really do it. Like, really make it perfectly symmetrical. And I apologize if I'm just wrong about how I'm seeing it.
I wonder if it's just because of these.
It could be,
Maybe,
yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think you're right. It does. I think that I would just really balance the image a little bit more if I were going to do something with mirroring. But I love the color palette of this one. I think it's a super strong, warm color palette. I think it works because the pinks are represented in the greens, where the green has more of a warm hue than a cool one, and I think that really helps.
Yeah, definitely.
Clean and simple.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that the lighting on the flowers matches the background. Like, you can see that there's light coming in from behind. And I think that makes it all the stronger because it's really motivated. It's nice to see a flower that's not flat lit, that's just like has some different variants going on the petals and the stem. So yeah, I think that's the strongest part of this. And I would actually say that I would move it up in the frame so there isn't so much white space at the top.
Yeah.
Or have an open white space at the bottom for that kind of balance.
That might be it. Cool. Oh wait, one more.
Oh yeah, I really like the weight of this one. Like, I like that it's heavier at the bottom and then moves up. And I think that the font is really well done for this particular one as well. It has that like sort of rounded organic look, just like the coral.
I think it's coral. I kind of like that it's so like 2 things that wouldn't be together.
Yeah, I like it too.
Yeah.
It is really interesting. Like, I immediately thought it was a sea plant, which is it's like not clearly, but that's.
But it almost looks like it could be because it has that kind of weight, like it's in the water.
It does. Movement. And I think your eye starts at the bottom on this one because that's where the most contrast is, and then goes up, and so it's almost surprising to get to the top.
Yeah,
and
you're
it's
like,
not
wait.
what you think. Yeah,
it's not kelp.
I'm a fan.
That's
I
really
think it's
cool.
Nice.
Let's see. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing. We are going to have another creative challenge tomorrow. And you can watch the video for that at 9 Pacific time and then submit, and Brooke will be giving some more feedback during her stream tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
So right now, going back to, she's showing her process, how she's piecing this tree together.
Yep, we're just going to jump back in and get a subject in here so that we can do the all-time fastest edit ever and just get it all together. So I'm just quickly, like actually quickly blending this one more little, there we go, root in.
Perfect.
Yep, we'll just get that in. I don't even like that, so we'll delete that. Just make it blend, change the color like we did before. So we've got too much blue happening. Make sure you pin that down. Okay, add the yellow, add the red. Oh, just a little. I always go overboard on the red. It's a really hard one to balance.
Yeah.
And then, okay. And so we have to crop this just a bit because I'm too impatient for that white strip.
That little guy.
Just to,
yeah.
So we'll just balance it like that so that the tree is in the center there. Okay, so we've got a good thing going on so far. We just need a person because I shoot
that's
people.
What you do.
Yeah. And so let's find our subject. I really liked this shot of her. And while we have this in camera raw, I'm gonna go ahead and lower the exposure just a little, take the whites down, maybe the highlights, yeah. But her hair is also kind of dark, so I'll take the shadows up a bit there, and the black point there. So I just totally grayed her out, like I like to do. And we're gonna get her in as best we can. So she's gonna be pretty tiny in this shot. I'm not totally happy with the way that she relates to the background, I think, because she's gonna be so small. But that's something where I would have to work on making the tree bigger.
Right.
And I can do that just by a little bit of stretching or something like that. But for now, we'll leave it as it is, and let's just focus on our subject. So we're gonna get the subject in. Whoa, computer. Okay, we're gonna get the subject in, and we just have to start erasing. So she's on my layer 8, and we're gonna create a little layer mask there. And again, now the great thing about this is that she's wearing this really solid dress. So she's not wearing something sheer or anything like that. So I don't need to worry so much about cutting some of the dress off by accident, because that's okay.
Because it could have been like that.
It could have been. See, you don't know.
Nobody would know.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
No, maybe okay, that was a little, I took it too far. I took it too far. But still, nobody would know.
For the most part.
Now, I shot her on a dark backdrop for compositing purposes so that she would enter into this dark space around the tree. So that means that certain areas like the hand aren't totally ideal because that's not on a dark backdrop anymore. We're putting her on this tree.
Yeah, so it'd be lighter, right?
And that's the kind of thing that, like, depending on the way that you like to shoot, of course, you can, you know, kind of handle it any way you want. But since this will end up being a really dark space that she's in, and it's not going to be a bright space, I get a little hesitant to use a bright background. The reason being that that bright background is going to reflect light onto her and almost give her like a slightly backlit look, and this is not going to be a backlit image. So I just want to make sure that the background is sucking the light away from her rather than taking it.
And you can fix those little areas later, like fix your hands.
Yeah, totally, which we will do.
Easier to fix one tiny little piece than to fix her whole self.
So, like, getting in here around the hand, it still can be quite simple. And, you know, honestly, like, I will spend anywhere from about 2 to 4 hours on average on an image. And I would say only about, like, 30 minutes, maybe an hour is typically spent on compositing.
Okay.
And that's because the rest of it is just those color changes and the light and the fun stuff.
The stuff that you really like to do.
Exactly. So this doesn't have to take a long time. Now it would normally take longer than I'm spending here because I would get into all the details, but it's still the same process of just using this brush tool with the layer mask and getting in on the details. But like I said, it's not see-through. Like, you can't see through her hand, so it's not a difficult area to manipulate. This part is a different story because here we have hair. Now here it's okay to just sort of go in because the hair isn't flowing, so I'm not gonna worry that much about this particular spot. We're gonna get in there and just get rid of some of that. But if you're looking for a tool to help with hair, and it's not gonna work well here, but I'm just gonna say it anyway, is you wanna look for the background, where am I going? The background eraser tool. So where the regular eraser tool is, you can find the background eraser tool. And when you click on the actual layer, this is going to allow you to sort of go around the hair pieces pretty easily. And so you can kind of see that little piece of hair got left there, and that's great because that's what we want. But it's gonna work best on high contrast areas. So if you're working with a white background and a dark-haired person, it's gonna work great. Whereas dark on dark doesn't work so well. But it's something that you would want to keep in mind. And so what I actually do sometimes is I'll photograph my subject on a dark background like this, but then I'll take that same person and have her like move her hair around on a light background so that I can just add that hair in really easily right on top.
Yeah.
And I actually did that during this photo shoot with this subject, which I don't have with me today, but I did it just to have it so that I could add that on. So we've got our subject, and she's just kind of floating there because she's not grounded yet, and we need to ground her. That's really important. So I'm just moving her to be a little bit lower, centered in there, but we need a shadow. It's so important, I mean, especially for a book cover where someone has to look at that and believe it right away to believe in the story. You have to be able to make it look like everything was really there.
Yeah, because your eye is going to pick that up. Even if you can't pinpoint like what's missing, if you're not a photographer, you don't have that eye, you're still going to notice something is off.
Absolutely. So I'm just drawing in with my lasso tool, and I'm going to feather this, and this will be my shadow underneath my subject, just to start. And it might not be right. I don't know yet. So we'll try 50 pixels. And I know I don't want it on top of my subject, so I'll just come down to above the tree area and create a curve adjustment and just make that area a little bit darker, just a little. We're just starting. Now, instead of going from the midtones and making it like that, I think that's actually a little bit like not the way that we see the world, because I'm taking the midtones down, but the highlights and the shadows are remaining as they are pinned there. So I would actually go from the highlights and take it down. And that way you're creating a more natural shadow underneath her. So that's a way to start the shadow, but we need a little bit more. So I would actually just make like a bigger area of shading all through here so that it's like she's really there. Just sort of, oops, where'd I go? Just projecting her shadow into that space. We'll right click and feather that, and I'll do 100 pixels for that one. So we're just making it a softer selection the bigger we go. And again, this won't touch our subject, just the background. I'm just making it a little bit darker so that it really, like, it looks like she might have been there. And then one more, just like that. And this is just intuitive based on studying shadows and figuring out where they might go. Now, because we shot in overcast light, we know that we need soft shadows. We don't need harsh shadows. And that makes shading a million times easier to be able to do soft shadows rather than hard. Okay, so we've got our subject, and even down here is darker, as it should be. If you have a subject where their feet look really bright, but then the floor is dark, that's not gonna work out. So she's not looking too bad there, I think. Let's zoom out, we'll just see. So that's kind of the image that we're working with at the moment. And I think that this is looking okay, but like I said, the tree stands out a lot from the background. The fog hasn't hit it yet, and we need to make the fog hit it. So I've put my subject on the very top here. I'm just gonna take this tree branch layer down to there, so it's below my subject. And now we've got our subject there, and I don't wanna cover her with fog. I just wanna cover some of the tree, because they're on two different planes. And the tree just needs it ever so slightly. So let's make a new blank layer above our tree, but below our subject. And on that layer, I already have my color selected that we painted in. So we can use that same color, big brush. And I'm gonna do something really weird, but we're just gonna paint right over there. I'm going to go with 0% hardness just to get down here. Okay. So that seems like a weird thing to do, but we can lower the opacity as much as we want and just create this slightly foggy tree. So you see how that's just like a little bit, but it makes it look like it's blended in just a little bit more. And something that I like to do personally is to actually like add more fog to the top of the tree than to the bottom.
Up, coming down usually,
And the other great reason to do this, even if it's not necessary for believability, is I like to do it because it draws the eye down. You know, like you're taking away contrast when you add this fog up at the top. And so it's better for keeping our eye to the bottom of the frame. So there we have the whole image coming together. I'm hitting save. And this will be the fun part now of starting to change the color and the lighting dynamics. And so let me go down and find this fog layer. It's layer 3. And I'm gonna create a little curve adjustment layer and pin that down. And I just wanna see like what happens if we make it a little bit darker, because I think it needs to be a little bit darker. And then in our layers, I just created this weird thing, right? And so that needs to be changed as well. So we'll just do the same thing there until it matches. Just make it a little bit darker. And then the same thing with the one right above it. So we'll just make that a little bit darker in the same way until it all matches really well. Okay, so now we have this nice dark, mysterious background. And I can start to play with the light. I know that I don't like the light corner here, the light corner here. It's too bright. So I'm gonna go in and just do this really big, weird, jiggly selection. And I'm going to right click and feather, a big, big feather. So we'll do like 800 pixels. And then I'm going to right click and select inverse. And so instead of just doing like a 4-corner selection, we're doing a big, weird, organic selection.
Very natural.
Very natural. And I'm just going to create a curve adjustment layer, as I've been doing, on top of everything to make the outside edges a little bit darker. So it's a little bit natural. But this area is still too dark for me. And that's the area that we really care about, is just where our subject is there.
You want the light to be there.
Exactly. So maybe a 500 pixel. And we'll try one more adjustment there, just to start to brighten that up and add some contrast in.
We are out of time.
Okay.
I know. It went by so fast, huh?
But we got her in, didn't we?
We got her in, and Brooke is going to show more tomorrow. She's going to talk about print sales, about how to prep your images for print, right,
Yep.
and galleries. So we are going to talk about that. And so if you have more questions for her, come back tomorrow, 9:30 Pacific time, and we will see you then. Thank you so much for sharing
thanks,
all
you
your
guys.
knowledge.
That was wonderful.
Yeah. Bye.